Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third class for environmental impact assessment, environmental audits, and environmental law. So in the past two classes, we have been able to have a general introduction about environmental impact assessment, environmental audits, and the basis for environmental law in Nigeria. Last week, we dealt about the general introduction about environmental audits, the objective of environmental audit, the importance of environmental audits, and why companies and organizations should make environmental audits important. Today, we'll go into the environmental audit process. And like I promised, we have a guest lecturer with us today. So this class will be a simulcast. She will take half of the class and I'll do a general review. Why next week we'll continue with the last part of the class. However, today we'll also review our last week take-home assignment. So let me give the floor to Ms. Yewande Seriki to take us on the course, and I'll do a review later. Ms. Seriki, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Lasisi. Let me start by sharing my screen first. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In just a second, please. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yewande Seriki, as I've been introduced by Mr. Lasisi. I'm taking environmental audit process under this course, and at the end of this course, okay. So at the end of this topic, it's expected that you should be able to explain the major steps in an environmental audit, describe the requirements for preparing an audit, identify the areas that can be audited in a given site, give reasons why the management needs to be involved in the audit process, and describe how a good environmental report should look like. The audit process is basically the main aspect of an environmental audit process. The process is a series of systematic and documented steps in a function or activity. So you can't have an environmental audit process without the actual auditing of the facility or the organization that you're auditing. It's at this stage that all the preparations, the actual auditing, and the post-audit activities will take place. It also involves identification of scope, definition of roles, the choosing of the team, and the carrying out of the audits itself. And at the end, a report has to be generated. It's impossible to have an audit and to have undertaken an auditing in a facility without producing a report. This is to show you the steps involved in an environmental auditing process. It starts with the planning. You choose the audit team, inspecting the sites, and collection of data. In this process, you have an interview, you have an interface with the organization, you go around the facility to see what exactly is happening there, collect data, you analyze the results of the audit, and thereafter you evaluate the audits and generate a report. A typical audit process that is undertaken in 4 steps. You plan, do, check, and act. The planning aspect of the audit looks into the scope and the commitments before carrying out the audits. So when at the inception stage, when you are being chosen to be part of an audit team, it's the first part is to identify the scope, to gain the commitment of the management. You want to identify why this audit is being carried out. Are they doing this to meet standards, or for regulatory processes, or they just want to do general in-house check to see how their processes and identify ways for which they can improve their processes. The next part involves the do. This is the carrying out of the audit itself. Excuse me. This is the actual auditing process. It involves the pre-audits, the site audits, and the post-audit activities. The check is the next phase. Here, you verify, you verify improved processes, and you assess the cost and the benefit of implementing the revised process. The next phase involves the act, takes place when improvements are being installed, standardized, introduced improvements into other areas of the organization. Just to cite an example, if you decide to audit, say, like a fertilizer plant, the team from the first stage, the team that is comprised of, that is going to be doing this audit is very essential. Who are the team members? It's essential to have a chemical engineer, to have an environmentalist, so that they will be able to interface amongst themselves of the different components of the facility. The do aspect, they also will meet with the management and gain their commitment, their buy-in into why this is being done. Also, commitment from the management is very, very essential, because you will find out that in terms of when you start to interview other personnel of the organization, some people might hoard information. So if other personnel of this organization find out that the management, they have the buy-in of the management, then everyone cooperates. You gain cooperation. Basically, you gain cooperation from every other member of staff, and no one hoards information, which will be very vital for the audit process and when you're generating reports. In due aspects, there will be no hindrances. That some places might be restricted areas, but once they know that an audit is being carried out, there won't be any restrictions to any part of the facility that is being audited. Also, in the scope, it would have been identified. The scope of the audit would have been identified, the boundaries of where you're auditing. Then the check part is where you begin to identify the important environmental aspects that need to be audited, like the air quality, the wastewater, the effluent that is being discharged into the environment. Is it meeting required standards? Then the act, here you make suggestions, measures that can be used to improve their processes, and how, if these are done, these are the benefits that will be gained from implementing these measures. The next phase will be the scope. So the scope of an audit is determined by the extent to which an audit is to be carried out in a facility. So this is just to break down the 4 steps that I've initially explained. So now we're talking about the scope. Here, the audit is determined, and the extent of the audit is being determined in the facility. Here you clarify the audit boundary, the objectives, and you identify the areas to be audited. It also implies that the management needs to be involved in the scope definition. So like I mentioned earlier, at the scoping stage, at the initial stage, it's essential that the management's buy-in is gained from here, because it helps even in the scope definition. The success and the failure of the audit is also determined by the commitment of the management and the outcomes, the recommendation. So it's one thing to even recommend. If you have the management's buy-in, then the recommendations will be taken up and they will be implemented, and there you can see that the report is being used. So it's not a document that will be produced and it just ends up on someone's table. The objectives of an audit are numerous, but these are just a few to be highlighted. The first is to investigate information such as the history of the facility, including previous environmental damage, examine current company practices. So if a company wants to review its current practices, an environmental audit is a good tool to use to improve processes and current practices. For the initial one, every environment has a history. Every organization is if it's sitting on a property, every property has an history. So it's always essential to identify the history of a place before doing an audit. Even if you're purchasing a property, it's very essential to do due diligence on the property, find out what activity was being carried out there, so that in improving your own processes, you know what measures to take. When companies want to improve on their processes, they different aspects are being considered. Management of resources. If it's a manufacturing company, they need to, if you're thinking about sustainability, you need to think of how you're managing resources and reduce waste. Pollution control, in terms of pollution control to air, water, and land. Handling, storage, and disposal of chemical or hazardous substances. So if, like for another same example, if fertilizer plants, how are they handling the hazardous components of their processes? So that's very essential too, and audits will help to understand all of this. And for general housekeeping, water consumption, paper consumption, or even training of staff, so that they can understand how to improve their process, how to improve their operations. An audit is also carried out company policy, permits and standards, legislations, and acts. So some organizations might carry out an audit to meet legislation, or for their company policy, or to meet a permit, or just in-house policies. For companies might have biannual training for their staff, or biannual audit of their processes. So an audit helps to verify all of this. Also to assess internal policy and company conformance. So if they want to assess how the company is conforming to legislations, an audit also helps to verify this, and also identify areas for improvement opportunities. Take, for instance, a manufacturing company wants to do a change in technology. With an audit, they can see how they're performing now, and if we implement a new technology, what are the opportunities for or the benefits that would be achieved by switching technology. So an audit helps to see. So it's good for comparison and comparative analysis in practice. The pre-audit process, this is the most, so after the scoping, then the pre-audit process, this is the most important stage in the whole audit process. Here, critical planning is usually taking place at this stage. This is the part where you choose the team, you identify the reason for doing this audit, you gain documentation, then site activities are queried, then compliance to legislation and company policies are also, this is a stage where you gain all this information. So the pre-audit process involves determining the scope of the audits, the selection of the team, obtain information, and management commitment. So in the next few slides, I will just be explaining these 4 processes of the pre-audit process. To start with, the audit team selection involves selecting team members, as the term states. So here you choose the team members. It's very essential that for the type of facility to be audited, you have your team is comprised of the right professionals. It would be horrendous to want to audit a manufacturing facility, for instance, and you have, say, a personal assistant on the team, someone who has no expertise. So expertise, the required expertise is very necessary. So the audit team usually interfaces with the health and safety manager of the facility that is to be audited. This person, the HSC manager, would detail a staff of his to the team. So the consultant, which is who is the one carrying out this project, is usually, so sometimes it can be a consultant or an in-house team is usually formed. There's an external auditor who is certified, must have the right qualification to do it. He has his own team members who have skills that are relevant to the audit process. So you must have skills in being able to interview people, because interview will be a very, very crucial process in all of this. Data collection, data reporting. In data collection, it's essential to be able to collect the appropriate data, report it in the appropriate format, because you might collect the data and somebody else might have to interpret the data. So it's essential that standards, the data is collected in a standardized form, so that there won't be misinterpretation of data, because misinterpretation of data can lead to preferring the wrong solution or the wrong measure for whatever activity that has been identified. The team members of an environmental audit can include the following: the client, an audit team leader, who is usually the consultants, or the team lead can be an environmental regulator who is also a certified auditor. It's essential that the reason for carrying out the audits is identified. It's very essential. It's just as the beginning. This is the very beginning of the process. So why this is being done should be identified. If it's to meet regulations, or the company just wants to have it, or to improve processes, it's very essential. Then the audit area selection is the next phase. You identify the significant environmental aspects that have to be audited. So if it's air quality, water, but this is usually this is determined as a result of the process that is occurring in the organization. So the activities and the operations will determine the significant environmental aspects that are to be audited. So you can audit from the air quality to water use, energy consumption, material use, waste management practices, accident and emergency records. This is a very important one that I'd like to highlight. For an organization, it's essential that they keep a record of the number of accidents, emergencies that occur on facility, be it due to operations, accidents due to operations, or just occurring. It might be something. If you keep a record of this, you're able to see a general welfare of your staff, and that is very essential, because the organization couldn't exist without its people. So it's essential that accident and emergency records are put in place. It also helps to see what kind of emergency response will be detailed for the operations. Also, public response and complaint. If neighbors of the organization, if the company is receiving complaints from their neighbors 2 facilities down the block, or 3 facilities further down, it's essential that they keep records of this. There might be opportunities. If you carry out an audit process, you might find out that there are opportunities for you to reduce the complaints that are coming from neighbors. Also, how they respond to it is also very critical, because if someone files a petition against them, these can be used as evidences that, oh yes, we did receive this, and this was how we responded to it. And in the turnaround time of response is also very important. Pollution control facilities in the company. This is also very essential. So in terms of water quality, air quality, and what kind of pollution control is being installed in the facilities. If it was a manufacturing company, do their plumes have scrubbers to reduce the amount of NOx that has been emitted through the plumes? So all these are very essential. Or it can just be generally for staff training. So, like I said earlier, the organization couldn't exist outside its staff. Its human capital is very, very important. So, staff training, continuous improvement of staff on how to improve their processes, on how they carry out activities on site, and everyone having being safety conscious. Being safety conscious is very, very essential for the general welfare and successful operations of the organization. The next phase will be the pre-audit information. At this stage, questions are asked either orally or through questionnaire. Like I said earlier, I did mention that interviewing, the team is comprised of those who can carry out interviews. It will be funny to have someone who is shy, who can't relate with people, being on an audit team, saying, and he meets with someone. So someone who has good interpersonal relationship is very essential, because you have to ask questions, and questions can be in any form. You can ask orally and you're taking notes, or you're just doing an interview. You're doing an interview with different people, and being also in carrying out interview, language is usually something that might hinder the quality of information that you're able to gather from different personnel. So different for an organization, a manufacturing company, you might have to speak with drivers or forklift handlers. So from across different range of people, if you need to speak Yoruba, Pidgin, I mean, in the ultimate goal, the goal at the end, the thing, what one needs to remember as an auditor is the success of the project. That is the driving. That is the reason why that goal has to be achieved. So it's essential that you're able to break communication barriers amongst you and whoever it is that you're interfacing in the organization. So information that could be gathered includes site history and geology, the personnel information, operational procedures, storage of materials, be it hazardous waste, whatever it is that they're storing, how they're storing it is essential to gather this. Selections of topics to be focused on in the course of the audit exercise, which are related to the subject areas in the facility, are collated in a checklist. So I'll talk a bit about checklist. Checklist is very important. Before on getting the assignment to audit a team, you would have a preliminary knowledge, you have preliminary information. The consultant usually has preliminary information about what type of company that you're visiting. It's also essential that even you as an individual do due diligence, go the extra mile, and if it means going on the internet to Google out information about the company, find out what it is they're doing. I mean, just have a brief idea. Then create a checklist. When you've seen the organization, then what you can also do is go find information about other similar countries that similar company that is doing, that is like a global company that is doing something very good, that is utilizing environmental best practices and best available technologies. You see what they're doing, then use that to create a checklist. Resources like World Bank usually has good resources on things like this. And ISO 14001 environmental management systems is a good tool also to use. So you can create a checklist and and it helps to even guide your interview process. So one thing from interview that I've realized is you might have preset questions that you want to ask, but some questions they emanate from interviewing people, from interviewing personnel. So if you have a checklist, it kind of guides you on what else to ask. You might ask one question and find out that, oh yes, a leading question is coming up from it. So a checklist kind of guides on all of that. So some things that might not be occurring on the sites in practice, but maybe in theory they're doing it. But with the checklist, it helps you to understand, helps you to gain that information out of the person. It's possible that you might just ask one question, and, oh, the person says, oh yes, definitely that we do this, but maybe not frequently, just when it occurs. So then with a checklist, you would have been able to address an issue like that without necessarily, you probably wouldn't have seen that if it was just, oh, let's ask the questions and stick to the preset information, the preset questions that I have come with. A checklist helps you. So some things that it helps you to gain more information that you might naturally miss, and you're able to gather that information. The last one here would be the management commitment. This determines the success of any audit that is to be carried out. The management buy-in is very, very important. Usually, it's the company that's going to fund it. So why they're doing it is very, very essential. It's because the scope of the audit, the potential interruptions of certain activities and personnel during the course of the exercise, and potential interviews could be requested from the staff. Earlier I mentioned that you might be some people might want, some personnel will want to hold information for whatever reason, because maybe they're just afraid that, or if this gets out, maybe their job might be on the line. So they just hold the information, or they just hold data. We Africans were we're so skilled at working in silos, and it's possible that the data that a unit or a department is generating might be useful for just another department in the same organization. But so they might, so if everyone in the organization understands and sees that the management, they have them, that this is from the management, then everyone cooperates. You gain cooperation of every personnel that you have an interface with. No one is holding information, and they understand. Also, the management would have met with their own organization, with all their personnel, to inform them that this is to improve their processes. So basically, you're having everyone's buy-in. Everyone understands the reason why this is being done. Cooperation is required from members of staff in terms of agreement and approval of the audits in order to achieve success. Depending on the size of the company, there should be a written agreement for conducting an audit. That would be all for today. Over to you, Mr. Lasisi.
Thank you, Ma, for the class. I will do a recap of the lecture, and I will explain more about the checklist and the environmental audit process. So basically today, we are looking into the environmental audit process, the process itself, and why do we do an environmental audit? Why do we carry out the environmental audit? So today's lecture is explain the major steps in environmental audit, describe the requirement for preparing an audit, give reason why management needs to be involved in the audit process, in which she has explained very well in the commitment process. So the environmental audit process involves a 5 or 6 stage process. It involves the planning. You must plan. You know, if you don't plan before you do anything, you'll fail. So there's need for you to put proper planning in place. You choose an audit team. The audit team determines how good the audit will be. So you cannot say you want to audit a fertilizer plant or you want to audit a petrochemical plant, and the team consists of ordinary chemists, and you have accountants, you have this. So for the audit process, the team is very crucial. Sites, inspecting the site and collection of data is also very, very important, because the kind of team you have will determine the kind of data you will obtain. The kind of team you have will determine the kind of data you will also obtain. Analyzing the data and interpreting the result is also very, very crucial. And that is a reflection of the team you have. So after all this, you need to evaluate the audit. You get the report and you evaluate it. No company, the purpose why company carry out an audit is how to become better, how to be on the side of the law. That is why most companies spend huge amounts of money to do an audit. So if you do an audit and there's no benefit for the company, it's not really an audit. So the audit process takes the plan, the do, the check, and the act. So you need to plan, you need to do, and you need to check. So you go to the scope of the audit, which she has fully explained very well. I want to talk about the checklist. I want to talk about the checklist, and I think I have a material which I want to discuss with us. Let me see if I can quickly bring it up. Just give me a minute. So that is a typical example of an environmental audit checklist. So you want to find out, is the environmental policy display on site? Do the company have an environmental policy on site? Is the policy up to date? You see some company here, we want to, our company wants to be safe, we want to be clean. Clean in what sense? Okay, but if the company said, okay, we want to be committed to the Paris Agreement, we want to reduce our climate, our carbon footprint, you know that that policy is up to date. It's in line with the new trend. Is the policy signed by the CEO? If it's signed by the CEO, it shows commitment from the top management cadre. So let me go to another section. So why part of the checklist are the sites, cabins clean and in good condition? Are there adequate parking facilities? Those are part of the checklist you look out for. For waste management, does it have a licensed carrier removal, a licensed waste operator to move? So these are the kind of things we look out for as a checklist. This will enable you to gather information very well. Are there adequate segregation measures in place? Do they practice waste sorting? Is there proper waste management? For energy, is energy power lights and the heat keep on a maximum minimum period? Do they just on the lights? You see, some of them will just on the security lights even in the afternoon. So those are the things that will help you. So I've shared that on the class platform. That is a typical checklist for an audit process. So also you can also look for the material management. How do they manage their materials? Is the company putting environmental sustainability in their core principle? Are they using reuse and recycle as part of their team? So are there nuisance around it? Is the noise and the vibration high? So typically that's what we have been able to do today. Like I said, the class is 2-in-1. We'll continue with the rest of the audit process next week. However, I want us to look at our assignment. Only Mr. Genesis submitted the assignment. Others, assessment number 1, 0. Any comments? Assessment number 1 for everybody is 0. So the question is, mention 3 ways by which EIA helps business. How do EIA help business? I said mention 3 ways how EIA helps business. 1, EIA can help business in planning. With EIA, the business can plan very well. 2, it can ensure environmental compliance. It can help them to comply with laws and regulations. 3, it can help to save capital. You see, with EIA, that you will be able to know where you should channel your energy, where you should put more funds in it. If the system you want to use before is a system that generates more waste, and there's a new system in place that can save waste, that means you'll be saving. So it can also help to reduce time and cost. It can also help to put image and have social acceptability. You know, the community member will accept it, because stakeholder engagement, which is part of the EIA process, will also help you. So I said, if you want to audit a cement factory, as an auditor, if you want to audit a cement factory, what are the likely audits you want to do in a cement factory, and what are the things you concentrate on? So some of the things you want to audit in a cement factory are the resources or conservation audits. You know, cement factory use natural material. They use limestone, and they use sand, and which are something that is not renewable. So you need to do what we call, how do we manage these resources by not just continue wasting them. Also, energy. The cement factory use a lot of energy. So you want to audit the energy. What are we doing in terms of energy? You also want to do pollution or environment audit. You want to look at the aspect of the environment. The cement industry generates a lot of particulate matter, and they generate a lot of carbon dioxide and also other particulates. So you want to look at that. You want to do carbon audit also. Cement industry also contributes to CO2 emission. They are one of the people that generate high CO2. So you want to do carbon audit. You want to do health and safety audit. You want to see what is how are the workers using the PPE. So what is being done. So that is the review of our last assignment. So next week we'll continue with the auditing process. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So if there's no question, no comments, I will expect your assessment of our guest lecturer. You can send the assessment of our guest lecturer to me, so that I'll review it with her. So no question. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next Saturday.